thank you very much for joining. My name's Dr. Ed Farrar. I'm the co-founder of Otto. And tonight I'm going to tell you guys more about our one-to-one coaching program, how it works, and also a bit in general about tinnitus habituation and how you can habituate tinnitus. So I'm going to give a quick presentation, and that's going to take you through habituation, how it works. We're then going to do a Q&A. So you guys are going to have the opportunity to ask me questions directly about tinnitus, about habituation, how it works. And then we'll talk a bit more about the one-to-one coaching program. So brief introduction to me. So as I said, my name's Dr. Ed Farrar. I co-founded Otto around 3 years ago because I have tinnitus myself. So I know how you feel. And in my career as a doctor, I saw firsthand how difficult it was for people like you to get help with tinnitus. So I got together with my co-founder, George. He was a doctor in the Navy. He also has tinnitus. He struggled with it a bit more than I did. And we decided to build something that would help, something that would give you instant access to help with tinnitus whenever you needed it. Okay, let's jump into the presentation. So you guys, could someone post in the chat to see whether you can see my screen? You should be able to see it. Yes, okay, good. You should be able to see a picture of a nose. You're probably thinking, why is he showing a picture of a nose? Well, I'm going to start by asking you a slightly odd question. When was the last time you noticed your nose out of the corner of your eye? If you're like me and you've got a big nose, it's quite notable, but it was probably quite a while ago, and you probably didn't notice it until I asked that question just now. Maybe you notice their nose often. Maybe you have a big nose like I do, but it doesn't cause you a problem when you look at it, right? Imagine if it was the same with your tinnitus. Imagine if it wasn't a problem for you to notice it, and imagine if you didn't notice it all the time. That's essentially what habituation is. I'm going to explain how that works. So, as I said, that's me, Dr. Ed Farrar. So to explain how this process works, I want you to think and remember, how did it feel when your tinnitus first started? What was the feeling you had when you first started to hear the ringing sound or the rushing sound or the boring sound, whatever you hear? What was the emotion? Well, for me, it was panic, fear. I was really struggling to listen to it, and I thought, I can't even cope with this for the rest of the day. How am I going to cope with this the rest of my life? And it's because we feel that horrible emotion, that feeling of fear, anxiety, hopelessness. Oh, Dorothy, awful, drove you nuts. It drives everyone nuts. It really is horrible. And I'm sure you guys don't want to be thinking about how it was when it first started, because it was so unpleasant. And because it's so horrible, your brain sees the tinnitus as a threat. And because your brain sees it as a threat, it sees it as something bad, it needs to check to see whether it's there all the time. Is it there? And then you notice it. You think about it. Your brain's checking. Is it there? You notice it. You think about it. And then, of course, when you do notice it and you do think about it, you hear it, it makes you feel bad again. And that reinforces the fact that the tinnitus is a threat. And then it means you check to see whether it's there more. You notice it more. Makes you feel worse. And I'm sure many of you listening will have empathized with that. You end up in this horrible cycle of hearing a tinnitus, feeling horrible, noticing it, feeling it, and you can't stop thinking about it or feeling it. And it means in the early days when you have tinnitus, it just means you notice it all the time. So tinnitus habituation occurs when you're able to change your brain's reaction to the tinnitus. So instead of feeling hopeless, anxious, frustrated, angry, you don't really feel anything at all. So we interrupt this cycle. We stop the negative emotion. And that means your brain no longer sees it as a threat. And if your brain no longer sees it as a threat, it doesn't need to check to see if it's there all the time. That means you stop noticing it. And if it no longer bothers you, you no longer see it as a threat and you don't need to check. And actually what happens is two things, excuse me. First thing that happens is you stop noticing it. The second thing that happens is if you do notice it, it stops bothering you. Doesn't make you feel anxious, hopeless, sad, frustrated. Doesn't make you feel anything at all. If I just use my own tinnitus as an example, this process happened to me. And if I cover my ears, I can still hear it. If I listen for it, it's still there. Just like if I look to see my nose, it's still there. But it doesn't bother me. It doesn't cause me problems. That means I don't notice it. And if I do listen for it, it doesn't bother me. That's tinnitus habituation. And that's what we can do. That's how we can help. Yeah. So those two things happen and the tinnitus is tuned out. You're no longer thinking about it, it's in the background. And as I said, this is me, as you can see on the left, and my co-founder, George. We saw this problem firsthand, and we saw how difficult it was for our patients to be getting help for tinnitus. And that's why we founded Otto, to help people like you that have been told by the doctors that there's nothing that can be done, to read the horrible stories online. There's an alternative. And that alternative is habituation, and it's a good outcome. So how do you habituate? Well, the primary way to habituate is with something called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. I'm sure many of you will have heard of it. CBT has been proven to be the most effective way to reach habituation. It will shorten that process significantly. And it's also effective if you combine it with some other things. So if you combine it with mindfulness, relaxation, sound therapy, you have kind of a multi-pronged approach that will get your tinnitus to be tuned out. How does CBT work? Well, it's all about changing that reaction your brain has. So remember, I said at the moment, probably what's happening in your brain is that your tinnitus makes you feel sad or angry or anxious or fear. CBT changes that. And it works on the basis that if you change how you think about something, it change how you feel. So what we'll do is we'll change how you think about tinnitus, and that will change how you feel about tinnitus. So CBT has been proven to be effective, and it's actually recommended as the gold standard tinnitus treatment across the world, the US, the UK, and Europe. So that's habituation. That's how CBT works, and that's what we offer in our one-to-one coaching program, CBT for tinnitus. So it's designed to get you to habituation as quickly as possible. Okay, so that's the presentation. We are going to go into a Q&A now. I'm sure many of you have got we've got a good bit of time here to dig in some questions. Some people, thank you to those people that emailed me with some questions beforehand. If you have any questions now is the time to pop them in the Q&A section. And I'll do my best to get around to all of them, okay? So first question, submitted by Donna. So Donna's asked, what is the percentage of people with intermittent tinnitus who have benefited from one-to-one coaching? And does the tinnitus go away completely? So I'll ask the last part of that question first. No, the tinnitus won't go away. We're not a cure, we won't get rid of it. In the same way, how you don't notice your nose, you know, we don't need to chop your nose off to stop you from noticing it. We just need to stop your brain registering it's there. So you won't notice it, but if you listen for it like I did just now, it will still be there. It just won't be a problem for you, and it won't have an impact on your life. The second part of your question, what percentage of people with intermittent tinnitus have benefited from the one-to-one coaching? So we get asked quite a lot about this. And usually it is, you know, I have this type of tinnitus, I have pulsatile tinnitus, I have tinnitus just in my left ear. My tinnitus changes in volume or changes in frequency. Whatever the type of tinnitus, whatever the frequency, whatever the character of your tinnitus, CBT will be effective. And habituation, the process of habituation, is the same. Okay, so it won't make a difference if your tinnitus is intermittent. It might change how long the process is, or how easy it is for you to change your reaction. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is I imagine when you have days when your tinnitus is bad, it makes you feel quite rough. And it's all about focusing on those days and changing the reaction to tinnitus on those days. Okay, so Donna, I hope that's answered your question. And in terms of the percentage of people with intermittent, I don't know the numbers because we don't register the type of tinnitus that people have, but over 90% of people are progressing on our one-to-one coaching and progressing quickly. So there's another question here from Peter. Thank you, Peter, for submitting this question. Can you approach help with conditions like diploacusis and hyperacusis? Okay, so there's two conditions there. Let me briefly explain for people that don't know what they might be. Diploacusis is when you hear different pitches of tones in different ears. That's less related to tinnitus, and that's not something we work with. That's something you need to see a doctor about, because there could be an underlying cause there. Hyperacusis, however, is sensitivity to normal sounds. So if if you have tinnitus and you're starting to become uncomfortable around normal sounds, that's when we might call it hyperacusis. Now, hyperacusis is treated using cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And the way it works is, again, changing your reaction to the sound that makes you uncomfortable. So a lot of people develop hyperacusis because they avoid sound with tinnitus because they're worried about their tinnitus getting worse or being worsened by normal everyday sounds, which is normal. It's normal to worry about that. But what we need to do is we need to stop you reacting in that way to normal sounds so that your brain can readjust. So if we change your reaction and we get you feeling more comfortable with normal sounds, your brain will readjust and you'll stop feeling uncomfortable with your sounds. So in answer to your question, Peter, yes, we can help with hyperacusis. Absolutely, it's treated in the same way. But we can't help with diploacusis. Thank you for submitting those questions. So question here from Mehdi. My habituation is okay, but whenever I have an intense sports session, my tinnitus spikes for about 2 days and gets in the way, and then it gets better. How can the one-to-one help for that? So your perception of tinnitus. So the first thing I would say, Mehdi, is I can't give specific advice from a medical perspective. And I would certainly recommend, if you haven't already, you speak to a doctor about this, because there could be an underlying physical cause to your tinnitus. In general, though, the volume of tinnitus is determined, it's actually very subjective, the volume of your tinnitus. And the more stressed you are, or the more uncomfortable you feel, will actually change how loud your tinnitus is. So let's say I feel stressed, I've had a stressful day at work, and there's lots of adrenaline going around my body. That will make my tinnitus seem louder. And when it seems louder, that makes me feel more stressed. So Mehdi, I'm presuming for you, what's happening is during those spikes, it feels quite uncomfortable for you and it's quite unpleasant to listen to. What we would do is we would work with you to change the reaction during the spike. So when you have a spike, instead of feeling stressed or anxious or frustrated or angry when you hear your tinnitus, we would change it so that it doesn't bother you when you have a spike. And you'll actually probably notice the spikes less. But I would just reiterate that I don't want to comment too specifically on your situation and if you haven't seen a doctor already. Thank you for the question. Roger, thank you for submitting this question. So I'm going to answer this live. So Roger habituated to his tinnitus for 5 months and was feeling good. Great. You've done it before. So if you can do it before, you can do it again. It's often a lot easier doing it the second time round. And you've had a few stressful events in your life and it's returned and the spikes continued. Is this common? And I'm assuming CBT will help. Yes, this is very common. It's really normal for stressful periods in your life to make tinnitus seem worse or spike your tinnitus. And it's happened to me before. CBT will absolutely be effective for this and is a really, really good way to get you back to that point of habituation. The good thing for you, Roger, is your brain has done this already. So with a bit of help, I'm confident that we'd be able to get you back to that point in a pretty short space of time. I'm very happy to chat though separately to how we could help if you wanted some more details. But yeah, it is common for spikes to happen. It is common to go through stressful periods and tinnitus to get worse, and CBT will help. So we've got a question from Liz. So Liz only gets tinnitus during the night and it's on and off all night and wakes you constantly, and it's thudding but not pulsatile. Diagnosed as MEM and left ear only. 3 to 5 hours sleep. During the day, I'm fine. So I guess hard to change perception during the day. Look, Liz, sleeping can be really, really tough with tinnitus. And it's really common for tinnitus to be a lot worse at night. And the reason that is because it's at night, the environment's really quiet. And when the environment's quiet, of course, we notice tinnitus more. So it's harder to distract your brain to not listen to it. I think if there's a kind of a question here is, would CBT be appropriate for this type of tinnitus? Yes, absolutely. CBT is effective for all kinds of tinnitus. So if any tinnitus is having an impact, if any tinnitus is making your life difficult or it's interrupting with sleep, focus, mood, CBT will be effective. And the reason is because, again, it's all about changing how your brain reacts. So Liz, what we do to help you is we'd focus on how you feel when you go to bed. And what I imagine might happen is that when it gets to the time before you go to bed, you start to probably think, oh God, am I going to have another night of difficult sleep? You start to worry a bit. And that, of course, will in turn makes things worse. And then you do notice your tinnitus and it frustrates you or angers you. And you end up in that cycle of not being able to stop listening to it. That's normally what happens. And, that's what may be happening to you. So what we would do is as I said, we would work with changing that reaction and getting your body into a state of calm and peace before you go to bed, so that when you do go to bed, even if you do notice your tinnitus, it's not a problem. It doesn't stop you from sleeping. Another thing is people wake up regularly, or if people wake up in the night and hear their tinnitus, it stops them from going back to sleep. And this used to happen to me. If you wake up and you hear your tinnitus, triggers that feeling of stress and panic. God, I'm not going to be able to get back to sleep now. And again, CBT, we would change that reaction so that if you hear your tinnitus when you wake up, it doesn't really bother you as much. If it doesn't bother you, then you can just go back to sleep because you've not triggered that stress response. Question from Steve. Thank you, Steve. So, or comment. So, Steve's tinnitus seems to get louder if you move your jaw in different positions or touch the left-hand side of my cheek. So, Steve, I would certainly recommend speaking to your doctor about this if you haven't already. It is possible for tinnitus to be affected by movements of the jaw and that kind of thing. But look, it's important you get that checked out if you haven't already. Wow, first time this has happened. I've caught up on questions. Please do ask me more questions, guys. You've got me for another 25 minutes. So any questions about tinnitus, I'm sure there's lots more questions that you guys have. Please feel free, and we can talk about them. You know, it might be a question of, you know, my tinnitus is this, will it help? How does it help? So, you know, I'm sure you've got plenty more questions. Please keep them coming. Happy to go through them. So Julie, you already have the Otto app and one-to-one coach sessions. Are they an extra cost? Yes. So I'll talk about how much they cost at the end. We are doing a special offer for you guys tonight. So if you sign up by the end of the week, we're planning sessions for next week, we can give you 30% off your first month. So the sessions, in fact, that's probably a good time to show you. I'll come back to that, Julie, and I'll come back to how much it costs, and we can talk through that in 10 minutes at the end. Vicky, thanks for just joining. Question about acupuncture. There have been some small studies looking into acupuncture with tinnitus, and it's not been found to be effective in the long term, unfortunately. They've done lots of studies into lots of different things to help with tinnitus, and unfortunately, the only two things that are effective, firstly is CBT, and the second thing actually is a hearing aid if you have hearing loss. So if you already have a hearing loss, or your hearing's already damaged, and that's measurable on an audiogram or hearing test, then a hearing aid may be beneficial for your tinnitus as long as you're wearing it. Of course, when you take it out, you know, to go to sleep at night, then it's not going to be effective. But if you have a hearing aid and you have a hearing loss, then it can be effective for tinnitus as well. Great. So there's a few more questions coming in. Thank you, guys. What's the average time it takes to habituate? So this is the difficult one to answer because tinnitus is very subjective. What we do know is that if left untreated, you will habituate. It can take years, but if you're lucky, you know, it can take a shorter period of time. With CBT, we would expect you to habituate in around 6 months. And with our one-to-one program, our one-to-one CBT program, we're seeing people habituate between 3 and 6 months. Some people actually, a small number of people are in less than 3 months. But the average amount of time for us, for our one-to-one program, is between 3 and 6 months. However, you'll start to feel better before that. So, you know, after a couple of sessions, you'll start to notice your tinnitus less. That's how you know you're habituating. You'll start to have more good days than bad days. And we're finding that people are, you know, even after a couple of sessions, after a month, are having more and more good days, and they're recognizing that this process is beginning. And the tinnitus is having less of an impact on their life. And it's great to see that. So, Marin, are you familiar with the linear system? I am familiar with the linear system. There is some evidence to show that in some people with tinnitus, it might be effective, but certainly the evidence is no way near as conclusive as for CBT. And it's the studies weren't as big as the studies that we've done for cognitive behavioral therapy. I think there needs to be more research into it, and we need to see bigger studies to see whether this is something that's effective or not. It's also incredibly expensive, which is a blocker for many people. For those of people that don't know what the linear system is, it's a medical device where you put an instrument on your tongue and you listen to sound therapy for a number of time per day, and it gives you an electrical shock for your tongue, sound through the ears, and supposedly it will help with the tinnitus. Michael, so Michael's asked, I habituated my tinnitus for 12 years, but unfortunately returned 16 months ago, I think, through stress sleep. I'm sorry about that, Michael. It's really common for that to happen. And for people that have habituated for many, many years, if they go through a stressful period, their tinnitus can come back. CBT is so helpful for that. And the reassuring thing is you've done it before. Your brain has habituated already to your tinnitus. So it's going to be able to do it again. With help, I think you can get there quickly. Dorothy, thank you for the question. So Dorothy swims several hours a week. Would this be causing my tinnitus to be more pronounced? It's unlikely. Exercise, I would definitely encourage as much exercise as regular exercise, healthy eating, stopping smoking, cutting down on alcohol for tinnitus, because all these things will have an impact. I think it's unlikely that your tinnitus would be made worse by swimming. Is it true linear does not work for people with hearing loss? I'm not sure, actually. It's not something I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. So Steve, thanks again. Another question from you. So Steve's had tinnitus for 15, or a comment from Steve, had tinnitus for 15 years and forgot about it. Recently from a flight, got fluid in the ear, made you aware of tinnitus again. Yeah, this happens. Flights can be these annoying triggers for tinnitus. I'm sorry that happened, Steve. Mehdi, I was told that shiatsu can help relax the nervous tension in the body, therefore lowering the effects of tinnitus. So anything that relaxes you and reduces the stress in the body will help you to perceive your tinnitus to be less. And even breathing exercises will help you to perceive your tinnitus to be less. So actually one of the first things we do with CBT and actually in our app is we teach you how to breathe slowly and how to slow your breathing down. And that actually is effective because slowing your breathing down, reducing the rate of respiration will reduce the cortisol being released, and that helps to lower the perceived volume of the tinnitus. So Julie, what would be the difference between the CBT tools and the app and the coaching? Okay, great question. The app is a self-management tool and a self-management program that you can use and work through at your own pace to understand what works for you, and you can usually work through the content and find things that work for you. When we combine the app with one-to-one coaching, as we do in our program, so you'll have 2 coaching sessions every month, 45 minutes each. You'll be working with one of the top tinnitus specialists here in the UK. So we only work with the best, actually. And they've all got decades of experience of managing people with tinnitus. So you'd have one-on-one support with one of the top tinnitus experts here in the UK, and 2 sessions a month. What you learn with those sessions, you'll put into practice using the Otto app. So the app goes from being something that you're using to learn these things to actually just a tool that you can use to integrate these skills and techniques into your life. The one-to-one coaching is hyper-personalized. So we'll focus specifically on the things that you're struggling with. So if you're struggling with kind of the feeling of anxiety that you have around your tinnitus, then we'll focus in on that. And what that means is that actually one-to-one coaching is a much faster way to habituate. What that looks like in terms of timelines, we would expect someone to habituate to tinnitus using just the app kind of 8 to 12 months. One-to-one coaching is between 3 and 6 months. That's what we're seeing. That's what our data is showing us. And that's just because it's more personalized. It's more personalized to you. We can get straight into the things that you're struggling with, and we can solve those for you much faster than the app would be able to. But the app is a great tool, and lots of people have found it really helpful. Thank you for the question, Julie. Anonymous attendee. So do you think it's best to try to avoid the hearing the tinnitus as much as possible, or to hear it, but only to practice not reacting emotionally? Good question. We get this, I get asked this a lot. No. Avoiding the tinnitus will reinforce with your brain that it's something bad. So your brain is already conditioned to think that your tinnitus is bad. And by trying to avoid it or trying to not think about it, A, you will probably end up thinking of it more. And B, you'll reinforce that kind of idea that your brain thinks it's something bad. So, one of the things we talk about early on in CBT is, if I say to you guys, don't think of chocolate, it's the first thing you think of, chocolate. And it's the same with tinnitus. If you try to not think about it, you try to avoid hearing it or noticing it or listening to it, it will reinforce, well, first thing, it will just make it more, you'll make you more aware of it, but also reinforce the fact that your brain thinks it's a threat. So with CBT, you might find that because you're thinking about your tinnitus more in the early stages, you're noticing it more, that will change. That will get better in time. It takes practice, but you will get there. Great question. Thank you. KP, positive comment. I found when I first started to suffer from tinnitus, I couldn't get to sleep. Using sound therapy similar to those on the Otto app has over the last few months helped me to really sleep well. Brilliant. Thank you, KP. I'm really pleased your sleep has improved. Sleep's really difficult for people with tinnitus. Okay. So Lynn has made a comment. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for your time explaining this. You're very welcome. We do these every week, so please do come back. So you're working with a hearing consultant who's also a tinnitus consultant and giving you some hearing aids that you can play relaxing sounds to, and also coaches you. Great. That sounds like you're getting some really good help there. It's really good to find someone that can help with your tinnitus. Steve, is it okay to say to yourself, T is safe? Of course. Provided you've seen a doctor about your tinnitus and your doctor's checked everything out and you've had the all clear from then, your T is safe. Your tinnitus isn't going to harm you. And that's actually one of the things that you need to train your brain into doing. Your tinnitus won't harm you. Tinnitus isn't going to hurt you. It's not a threat. And again, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, of course. It takes time, but with practice, with time, your brain will reprogram itself. Is it true tinnitus can be caused by an injury to the head? Yes. If anyone's had a recent head injury and hasn't seen a doctor or has tinnitus, then please go see a doctor. I can't give specific medical advice, but in general, it's absolutely possible for tinnitus to be caused by head injury. So please get that checked out if you haven't already. Great. So I'm going to give you guys some more details about the one-to-one program in the last kind of few minutes we've got. So if you want to get to habituation as quickly as possible, we've built the one-to-one coaching program to help you do that. And what it includes is, as I said, everything you need to get to habituation as quickly as possible. So you'll get expert one-to-one coaching, 2 sessions a month. They're 45 minutes each. And you'll work with one of the top tinnitus coaches here in the UK, they'll have many, many years experience in working with people like you. Actually, 2 out of 3 of them have tinnitus themselves. They know what you're going through. You'll get access to regular group support events like this, which many people find really helpful to know that others are going through a similar experience. It includes full access to the app and our personalized program in the app, but also you get access to 24/7 support from our team. So any questions you've got about your tinnitus, you'll be able to ask us. There was a question about how much it costs. So it costs £249 per month. You can cancel anytime. So even if you wanted to do just the first 2 sessions and then cancel, you could do that. We find that most people stay with us for 3 to 6 months, and that's how long it would take them to get to habituation. And then they can go back to the app and maintain that afterwards. If you're in the US, it's $319 per month. Now, guys, I have a really exciting special offer for you. So for today and tomorrow, if you sign up, you can get 30% off your first month. And that helps us. The reason we have that time limit is because obviously it's Thursday. We've only got Friday to plan the sessions for next week. So if you can let me know by tomorrow or sign up by tomorrow, you get 30% of your first month. I'm going to send you guys all these details afterwards in an email. If you wanted to speak to me, some time with me, if you have any questions, then please do let me know. I'm also going to put this link in the chat. So question from Julie. If we already have the app, the cost is the same. So what we would do is we would cancel your app subscription, and then you would go on to the one-to-one coaching subscription. So the cost of the one-to-one coaching includes access to the app. If you've paid for a yearly subscription, we can either refund some of that or knock some off your, or knock off the cost of the one-to-one coaching. So guys, if anyone does want to sign up this evening, I'm going to put those details in the chat. And I'm also going to send you an email afterwards with these details. Before I finish this evening, does anyone have any questions about one-to-one coaching and how it works? Liz, I would be really interested to see the Zoom meeting of the 1st of June. Is there a link for? We've got another one next Monday, Liz. So if you go into the app, you can see a list of all our webinars. And you can go into it and you can see you can sign up in the app. But if you don't manage to find it, please send me an email and I'll send you the sign up link.